Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou e whakawhāiti nei I runga I tēnei kaupapa. I begin with a traditional introduction from my native culture in New Zealand. Tēnei te mihi kia koutou, mai I te moana nui a kiwa. I bring you warm Pacific greetings, also known as the Great Ocean of Kiwa. Ko hikurangi me aoraki aku maunga, my mountains of hikurangi and aorangi call to your mountains. Ko te waiapu me aoraki aku awa, and my rivers of aoraki and waiapu speak to your rivers. Ko ngā iwi katoa o Aotearoa e hono atu kia koutou o tēnei whenua. And my people connect to your people as we share a past, a present and a future. Nō reira huri noa I tō tātou a ruma, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. So to all of us here, can we join in the opportunity to share knowledge with one another and also to share identity, language and culture. Buongiorno. Thank you. I want to acknowledge the ADI, the current president, Maria Siniskalko, to all of you who have made it possible for all of us to be here. I also want to acknowledge my fellow speakers. It's been a tremendous experience for me to see and hear their experiences in the world, and to follow my colleague talking about Bhutan is a hard act to follow, but I want to acknowledge everyone. So you had the 2-minute introduction of our country, and you can see where we are on the map. We've positioned Australia to be our shield, and if you miss New Zealand, next stop is Antarctica. So you have to be very clear about where you are heading to. I wanted to say a little bit about me because it drove why I ran for Parliament and what I did as Minister of Education. So I am a native Indigenous Maori New Zealander. When I'm out in the world, I'm a New Zealander. When I'm at home, I am a Maori New Zealander. When I am amongst Maori, I am Ngāti Porou, a tribal group on the East Cape of the North Island. I grew up in that community, a very poor community in terms of economic well-being, but rich in culture, in history, in connection, in relationships. I'm one of 10 children. I come from an era where having big families was a normal and ordinary thing to do. I grew up with a mother who was part of the generation in our country where our language was forbidden to be spoken, and laws were passed to try to erase the key vehicle of culture, our ability to speak our language to each other. And I grew up with a father who fought here in Italy in the Maori battalion during the Second World War. My grandfather also fought here, and New Zealand keeps alive those connections. My husband and daughter came to the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Cassino. This part of Italy is where the 28th Maori Battalion was stationed at different periods, and those names from here are the names of children I went to school with. Firenze, Cassino, Anzac. This tradition of naming children for the particular time has been very powerful in my culture. Education is what gave me, my family, our communities, all of us, the opportunities to have choice in our lives. Without an education, we have very few choices. With one, we get to step forward into opportunities that might not otherwise be there. I'm a professional public servant. I've served the governments of New Zealand for the last 43 years. I started when I was 10. No, the joke didn't hit? Okay. So I've worked for the New Zealand government, and I ran for Parliament finally because I was exasperated with ministers not having the courage to invest in ways that I felt were important, and that was that all New Zealand children should get the opportunity of a good education. And our system was biased to the norm, the majority population. That's quite a common sense thing. The numerical weight of students is what drives the focus. But the community I came from, I grew up with an understanding that it was my responsibility to serve the needs of my generation. That was the motto of the school I went to: grow up, fulfill the needs of your generation, take advantage of the technical expertise of other cultures and communities, and always remember that you are Māori, that is your place in the world, that is how you interact with the world. Our country had a very poor record in terms of educational success for Māori, for Pacific Island students, for students from poorer communities. And being a passionate New Zealander, I wanted all of our children to have the best possible education they could. So I ran for Parliament because I was tired of working for ministers who didn't seem to me to tackle the difficult problems. I got into Parliament in 2008, and I started by being the Minister for Women, and I focused on how we could get more women on boards, because the data is absolutely clear that with diversity you get better outcomes. I was the Minister of Ethnic Affairs. Our country is multicultural, and I celebrate that diversity and that distinction and how we give voice to that and space to that. Then I went on to be the Minister of Energy and Resources. It's great being a country that small. You get to do lots of different things, and so I had to learn all about renewable energy, the cost of oil-producing countries and where we might import it from. And during my time, we had a major collapse of our gas pipeline, which turned off the top half of New Zealand. And it was my personal job to get that pipeline connected again, because that's what your citizens expect of their ministers, is to get the job done. In any event, that was great training to finally become Minister of Education. I got a phone call from our Prime Minister. We all knew that the portfolios were being distributed, and he said, "Would you like to be Minister of Education?" which of course was well known throughout our party and our government. I screamed so hard I practically perforated his eardrum. He said he'd never had that level of excitement for anyone wanting for the education or health portfolios. So I went to work on it, and I started by trying to understand what the data said about the quality and distribution of our education. Because as Tho said just before, what measured is what gets counted. And I wanted to understand, did we have good learning data? What we had was gazillions of data. The Ministry of Education collected data on presence, on absence, on buildings, on playgrounds, on teachers, on assessment. But none of it was connected to say, how well is this child doing? What does this student need and when, and how do we get it to them so that their learning progress could continue. So it didn't exist, we built it. We built a data framework that became my main tool of operation. Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to be clicking this. Let me just quickly say, we all have huge global challenges. Every generation faces a crisis. Schools are both the microcosm of those crises and the core of how solutions can be found by investing in the mindset and the capability of its students. That's my mountain, Mount Hikurangi. It's the first piece of land in the entire world where the new day begins. The first ray of dawn of every new day starts first on our mountain. We know that to be a fact, both scientifically and culturally, because we believe it, because in the year 2000, little old Pitcairn Island out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, they were trying to displace us and say that's where the sun came up first. There were others that were competing with us. So we had to get scientists to carefully measure, and it's now accepted in Western culture, whereas we knew all along that was the case. Now, the reason I make a big deal about culture is because I'm used to walking and talking, so I'm finding this quite constraining. Is because it's really important, those of us who work or have worked in the education system, to see that child with his or her name in his or her language, culture and identity. Because for teachers who are the makers of magic in terms of learning, you have agency. For all the talk we have about students having agency, if we don't start off with the personal relationship of who are you in the world, how do I see you, know your name, know what it means in your family, your community, your culture, we begin a relationship of respect. The platform it creates for learning is more powerful than simply calling a roll and ticking off who's in the classroom. I got into trouble in my first week of being Minister of Education, and it pretty much carried on that way. I should tell you, my first phone calls as Minister was to the teacher professional associations and the unions, and to the principals professional associations and the unions. Those were my first phone calls. They were my first meetings, because I knew I was not on the ground out there causing learning to happen. I couldn't be effective in my job if I didn't have a relationship with the people who make this process of learning occur. Regrettably, I was from the centre-right party government, and so not immediately trusted by the education sector. I'm happy to tell you they came to love and adore me. Not quite. I'm happy to tell you that as the longest serving Minister of Education in New Zealand, after I left, they told me how much they appreciated me. Very normal, yes. Thank you. So language, culture and identity is the main resource of any country. We don't all want to be the same. We do want our distinctiveness, our history, the beauty of this meeting room, the way the cobbles, fill out the way you walk in this city. It's distinctive to you, and as To said, is representative of a wider, deeper, richer culture that is Italy. So New Zealand, we're intrepid ocean navigators. My ancestors navigated by the stars to get from where they were to where we are. There's a debate in New Zealand about how many giant canoes brought all these tribal groups to New Zealand. 7 apparently. Doesn't matter to our tribe because we were always there. We were there on that mountain. And our welcome to people coming, we would go, Hai ere mai, hai ere mai. So we would sing to those coming to our shores. I would announce this at meetings where lots of other Māori were, and they go, no, yeah. Anyway, I think you already saw the snapshot of the New Zealand system. We're not unlike yours. There's nothing particularly different about how we're organised. Where we're likely to be similar is that it is still a system built on an industrial age conception. It is still built on a production line based on years where you move along through your classrooms, and it is still very much taught based on assessment and examinations. We've softened the edges of all of that, but we really need a radical overhaul where we focus on the student at the centre and their outcomes. I was asked to briefly talk about Tomorrow's Schools, which we launched in 1989, and I was working in the Prime Minister's advisory group when we designed that, so I've been involved with New Zealand education, and the idea was to put the governance in the hands of parents and the principal and lead staff of the schools, and have the government fund their decisions about what was best for their school and their community. That's happened. There are positives and there are negatives. The negatives are it introduced school by school competition, and it's been really hard to restore collaboration. It's also led to our divisions on economic wealth, what you can afford in your community and what you can't. The upsides of it are that parents really do run the school as a board. They really do recruit and employ their teachers. They are involved in the design of the curriculum, and they are elected every 3 years by their community. My approach, learning is everyone's business, and you can read all the things that are up there, but where we get to is the smartest investment an economy can make is in the skills and qualifications of its people. And the best return on investment is in investing in the quality of teaching and leadership in our schools. And because that was what I was committed to, and you're going to tell me when I'm over, right? Roberto said I can go on for another hour. Okay, so my goal and my government's goal was to raise the level of achievement of all children. To do that, I was set public measures. My responsibility was to get 85% of all 18-year-olds in New Zealand our leaving certificate of education, which allows you to go on to further training, into jobs, go to university. And I'm going to show you the graph of my performance, or at least my leadership over that time. And it was 85% of 18-year-olds, whether they were in school or not, whether they were employed or not, whether they were in some kind of care or not. It was all 18-year-olds in New Zealand to achieve this qualification. And I negotiated that it be 85% of all our cohort populations, because averages hide those that are failing through those that are overachieving. And my goal was to lift the learning achievement of all communities. I also was set another one because we all know about the importance of early learning, and it was to achieve 98% of all 5-year-olds starting school having participated in quality early learning childhood education. Because if we don't make that investment there, we spend far too much time in our education system doing remedial teaching. If we can, like in the health area, invest in primary care, if we invest early in our youngest children, then we don't have to keep spending so much money on fixing up lost learning as they travel through the education system. In order to know whether we could and were doing what we said we were, we created this data framework. And it captured the information of how many 18-year-olds we had, where they were in the country. The 18-year-olds when I became minister, because we had 5 years over the term of the average of secondary school. And we focused on going from numbers to names to needs, so that we could work with schools around their specific challenges, not the general challenges. Another 20 minutes, don't worry. Don't worry, Roberta. And it got to the point, the data was so good, a couple of things. Schools found me, they hadn't worked with a minister like this. I was a useless politician. I was not in Parliament to have a politician's life. I was there because I wanted to be involved in education. So that meant when I would go to schools around the country every Friday of the 40 weeks of the year of the school. I was in 5 schools every Friday, if not more. And all I wanted to know was, what is your learning data? What is it telling you? What progress are you making? What do you need to be more successful? That's what the data was for. And it got to the stage where they thought, nah, she's a politician, that can't be right. You know, they only want to come get their photo in the paper, cut ribbons on new classrooms, and then go off. And I was like, no, I just want to meet the chair of the school board, the principal, and whoever's in charge of the data, which I required that they start collecting, and we would help them. And I would spend time in the principal's office going, wow, I can see how your 6-year-olds are making great progress. Why is there this big dip here for the 8 and 9-year-olds? That was the kind of minister I was. I was hopeless at being a politician. When I went to tell the Prime Minister I was leaving at the end of 9 years, he said, what do you mean? And I said, I've done what I came to do. And he said, I knew you weren't a real politician. There's no scandal to your name. You're one of the highest performing people. And he said, but you were also an absolute pain, because you always said, but Prime Minister, the evidence doesn't support what you want to do. He said, also, I've never met a minister so willing to close a school for non-performance. I didn't see why we should condemn children to the repetition of a failing school, because that's form, that's not substance. That's saying, we've got a school, we must be doing something. No, if the data said we weren't, and I wasn't making fickle decisions, this would be based on a period of time. Anyway, the other thing is, schools can't do everything their society expects of them. And so I also set up community forums up and down the country. They were made up of the mayor, the chief of police, the local businessman, the local minister, whoever was influential in leadership positions. I set up forums and charged them with supporting the schools in their areas to be successful. And those forums continue to this day. Right, moving quickly on. And then we publish this data every 6 months. Every 6 months. This data was both in percentages and absolute numbers, because not everyone reads data and understands it. We did it for 5-year-olds to 18-year-olds every 6 months. We did it by ethnicity, we did it in socioeconomic levels, and we told them, you've moved from here to there, how can we help you to move further? I wanted there to be an outbreak of excitement about learning and achievement and students having the best time possible. So we facilitated festivals of education. Instead of, you can go to expos for trade shows and all of that, we started holding festivals of education all around the country. We launched a campaign of sending an online thank you card to the teacher who had made, some significant difference in your life. The Prime Minister and I sent our postcard out to the teacher that we thought had made a difference for us. I persuaded the Prime Minister to establish the Prime Minister's Excellence Awards for leadership, teaching, community engagement, student participation. And we ran it like the Academy Awards. We had a red carpet. We paid for the schools that were assessed by panels of who met these particular things, and then we paid for them a small, group of 4 to come to Wellington and to be, because we wanted education to be seen as what it is, the top of what we should be trying to achieve. We funded teacher-led initiatives and innovations. We created new professional learning and development pathways based on the specific needs of the teachers rather than what people had available to offer. And we got parents and families involved. We had a frenzy of excitement going on, and I was the main cheerleader. Anyway, here is the data of pretty much my performance. Māori, when I became the minister, or at least we came into government, were leaving at a shocking 43%. Less than half were achieving our main qualification. Over 5 years, they'd gotten to 73.5%. Pacifica were 50%. Half of our 18-year-olds were qualifying. At the end of 5 years, 77.6% were. New Zealand European were 73%. They gained up to 83%, and bless our Asian New Zealanders, they went from 84 to 93%. This is what data can do. Data in the hands of teachers in charge of causing learning to happen and knowing that it did, aggregated, can have that kind of outcome for a country at a national level. And so my main mantra when visiting schools was twofold. The core purpose of a school is to cause learning to happen and to know that it did. Its core purpose isn't to be assessing and examining and all of those other things that are inflicted on too many schools. It's to cause learning to happen, particular to that child, that group of children, and then know that it did. If you can do that, you become surgically precise about what changes need to happen in order for this student, ko te tamaiti te pūtake o te ao. The child is the centre of the universe. We say that a lot in education, but all the cacophony of voices are usually adults. Their parents, employers, teachers, reviewers, academics. My approach was to focus always on the child. Raising happiness, absolutely, and you've heard how that's explained. It wasn't just, how do we have a smile, but what does it mean for our well-being? Raising productivity increases prosperity, because being happy and poor is still being poor. And how do we lift that possibility for everyone? Anyway, we started on the sunrise on my mountain, and we are finishing on the sunset from my mountain. Thank you, ngā mihi, grazie mille.